We are talking about EDS in high level athletes, what it means, and how we can work through it. Um, yeah, again, this is Matt from Flashpoint Performance.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited to be doing this. And this is a super, I think, overlooked topic that obviously is really important to you and both of us, but specifically you and EDS and hypermobility.
Yeah, it's a huge part of my life and a huge part of a lot of athletes' lives, whether they know it or not. So,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, what was that like for you being in gymnastics in general?
Um, I mean, I always knew I was really flexible from a young age. I remember, I don't remember how old I was or what I was doing or why, but I remember one day I was just like in the gym, like in the gymnastics gym, and I was like, Mom, look. And I just got into a split. Like, I just felt like I could do a split. So I was like, let me try. And I just did like a full split. So I always knew that I was very flexible, and all my coaches used that to their advantage. Like my college coach, she loved to have me do like really cool poses that were like for people with a lot of flexibility. So it was definitely used to people's advantage as to mine, but also a big downfall as well.
Did you ever feel like you knew like that was like a problem right from the get-go?
Um, I think I knew like I was flexible, but I didn't know how much of a problem it was. I just knew that I wasn't like some girls were really tight and really strong and like had a lot of muscle, and I knew I didn't have a lot of muscle, but I was really flexible. So I always thought it was just like some people are born flexible and some people are born strong, and I just got the flexible one.
Yeah, I feel like that's so like interesting because like gymnastics is such a sport where there is hypermobility is needed, but also like there's a difference between being like overly mobile and unstable. And
Yeah. Like from your perspective, when do you think flexibility becomes a problem?
I think it's once I think there's different levels to it. When someone like hypermobility is technically past the normal ranges, and it really becomes a problem when you suddenly don't have the strength to be able to sustain it, or you're constantly overly loaded, as I know we're going to get into later, and eventually that leads to an injury. Obviously, as you
Yeah.
dealt with near and dear.
Yeah. Well,
Um, Yeah, and I feel like it's like the difference of are you mobile or are you unstable? And I think in people who are hypermobile, a lot of times they're actually unstable because they don't know how to actually use the right muscles and
right.
they're already set up to fail on that standpoint to begin with.
Yeah. So basically, we can get into the flexible positions, but we can't control them.
100%. I guess from like for your standpoint, like what did that actually feel like being so flexible? I mean, I don't know the first thing about being flexible, so I can't. But I hear about it from you, my wife, and all the
Yeah.
athletes I have.
Um, I, it was like it was always an asset for me in gymnastics, especially when I was younger. Um, but it was always like it was like little things. So they would like my coaches would try to correct me, and they would say, "Oh, you're arching so much on this, or you're um doing like." It was always a lot of like arching was a big my big issue. Um, and I was always just like, well, I can't control it. Like, I'm trying to control it, but I can't control it. Like, if I'm doing a back handspring, I can't control where my hands land, like how much I arch and where my hands land versus where if somebody's who's really tight, they're going really far back, whereas I'm super flexible. So I'm kind of like my arms are going like in a back handspring, right? My arms are going too far under, so I'm getting really, my back is arching too much, and then so my coaches would always try to be like, "Hey, like try to fix this," and it was really hard for me. And it was always like nobody else in my gym was as flexible as me. Like I walked on my toes, I did all these crazy things, which was really cool because it was great for gymnastics artistry, but it sucked for gymnastics like functionality. And so it was always like I think a lot of athletes like felt off and they didn't really know why. But what are you usually seeing when if somebody says that?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great point because I mean exactly what you're saying is literally what people come in and tell me is I just feel off,
Yeah.
and a lot of times it's actually to me that they're unstable, and they can't control it, and it almost sounds like from your vantage point like your brain doesn't know how to tell your muscle how to do what it needs to, which isn't a problem. Like it actually is a superpower if you can learn how to control it. But I think of gymnastics and baseball, where they're the two big ones, where like both of them have just so much mobility and they don't know how to control it. So a lot of times, I don't think typically baseball players have EDS like gymnasts do, but both gymnasts and those hypermobile sports, they're actually not knowing how to use that superpower they could actually have and know how to control it.
Yeah, absolutely. If I knew how to control it, I probably would have been a very different athlete.
Hey, but you did pretty well being clean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
When did you start realizing that like being hypermobile wasn't actually like helping you?
When I started getting so many injuries and so much pain. I mean, I like for me to have a major hip surgery in eighth grade is ridiculous. And that is actually when I got diagnosed with EDS was my surgeon. He was just like, "Hey, I think you have this. Like, go get tested for it." And I was like, "Okay." Um, and I did. And I mean, right now I think they're getting better with like research and stuff. But right now there still isn't really like a genetic marking or anything for HEDS, which is the type that I have. So it was kind of just like, you're really flexible, you can do all these things, okay, you probably have it. So yeah, I mean, I think when I started getting a lot of injuries, like, I don't know, I think I had my first cast at like 6 years old, which is
That's crazy.
stupid.
Yeah,
Yeah. Like I wasn't that high level of an athlete, obviously. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously I know that especially in athletes and everything and like in the EDS world in general, people get diagnosed so late sometimes and some doctors don't even believe it's a thing. Some doctors don't know anything. So like in your professional opinion, like do you feel like that EDS gets missed a lot and like missed early with athletes?
oh, 100%. Yeah, no, it was eye-opening to me because female clients are typically the ones that get covered, but I don't think it's just as simple as females do. I mean, I remember going to I was consulting at a high school, my own alma mater, and I remember every single one of these football players was had way too much mobility, which you don't think of football as that sport. You think of gymnastics, you think of dance, you think of figure skate. And it was like I just remember all these kids having back pain, having hip issues, having all these like injuries that I didn't remember having when I was or dealing with when I was that age. And it
Yeah.
was like, man, half these kids were just probably being misdiagnosed. I think it's, and a lot of times doctors, it's sometimes ignorance, sometimes a little bit of like negligence in the sense of not trying to understand and educate themselves, which is a whole different problem. But it's totally missed all the time. I mean, it should be easier because I mean, we literally have a Brighton score. We literally have the tools
Yeah.
that can fix that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but even then, I think like the Baton test and everything, like it gets things get missed. Like EDS is so specific, and like yes, there's hypermobility disorders, but EDS is its own. So I think that some people get diagnosed with hypermobility spectrum disorder when they really have EDS, or people get diagnosed with EDS when they really have HSD, right? And I think that is like the turning point. Like I think we realized I actually have EDS when I got my heart tested, and we realized I have mitral valve prolapse, which is a big thing in EDS. And I never knew. And but like
Yeah.
it's like super small, like it's obviously safe, like whatever, I'm not gonna die. But that's like there's like little things that separate them, and I think with the more testing you can get, just like the better you'll be, and your life as you get older will make more sense instead of you being like, oh gosh, this is weird. Like why am I always in pain? Like why are my knees popping out all the time? Like that kind of stuff.
But I also don't think people think of like, yeah, like you are literally a high level athlete, and people look at these people who are so mobile and doing so many amazing things, and they just don't realize like they're also in pain. They also have other things, and if they don't fix it, it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, I remember I would do like back handsprings and my shoulders would pop out and I was like, ah, like it was terrible. And I mean, I knew why, obviously, now that I'm older, but um, they'd be like, why'd you stop in the middle of your routine? I'm like, because my shoulder just popped out.
You can't keep going.
Yeah, that hurt.
Which I guess from your standpoint with like injuries and performance, like especially now that you're on the strength side and living through it, like, what were the things you really, both as an athlete and now as a professional, like what do you feel like you see pop up the most from an injury standpoint in like gymnasts and even your athletes?
Well, I always struggled with hip problems and low back pain, and low back pain is huge in gymnastics. There's so many things where you're arching, you're doing these, like, you're completely folding in half, the things that the human body shouldn't normally do, you're doing in gymnastics. So I think back pain is huge, shoulders are huge, hips, like the major joints, shoulders and hips are big, and then obviously like ankle and Achilles stuff, but gymnasts can get hurt literally doing anything and anywhere on their body. So, like, I broke my tailbone once, which was horrible. Not related to EDS, but it was terrible to break my tailbone. So it's
I
like,
can imagine.
yeah. So, you can just like get injured doing so many different things, and like, especially hypermobile athletes. I mean, you know this. Like, why do hypermobile athletes get injured more often?
Oh, I mean, to me, it's crazy, but it's the fact that there's like just repetitive stress. Like we literally make our hypermobile athletes do sports that don't have time off. They're only building upon their already muscle imbalances, and then like for like a gymnast, for example, like back pain's always happening, right? You're literally putting people in a hyperextended position, and there's eventually gonna be so much strain on that area that eventually like it's like taking a rubber band and just continuously pulling on it. Because eventually it's gonna snap. So I
Yeah.
think that's a big part of it. So it's both load management, it's lack of training properly, it's lack of education, and it's also just not letting these athletes take those recovery times that they need.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's pretty, I mean, it's crazy to me from, I guess, from a performance standpoint. Like, did you ever feel like there are limitations from that? From like some of those like stresses and repeated stresses and the fact that you were hypermobile and didn't have control of it?
Yeah, I think there was more limitations in the fact that I was hypermobile and got injured really early in life. So like I couldn't do a lot of straddle stuff because my hip surgery from early in life, and also just because it wasn't great for my hips, but that was all caused by hypermobility. So there were limitations in that aspect, and there were also limitations in um just like when I got older and like in college, like how many numbers I could do, because it was almost like the more I did, the worse it got, which is like pretty standard for most people. Like the more you do, the worse you get, especially when you're having a bad day. But yeah, like the amount of numbers I could do. I mean, my last season I was injured, which sucked. But like I couldn't do like I spent 4 hours on beam, or like I spent 2 hours on beam and a 4 hour practice, but I couldn't do skills constantly because my body would just totally break down. And so there were limitations there, and like some things that people don't think about, like sleep. Sleep is so disrupted by hypermobility, which is, I
Yeah.
don't actually know the science behind it, so maybe you do, but like that big problem. Like I wasn't sleeping for a long time, and that like gave limitations to my practices. So little things like that, I definitely noticed. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because you're touching like a big part of like fatigue, right?
Yeah. Why
And
does fatigue make it worse for athletes?
I mean, so like a lot of it's because you no longer control it, and you don't really have that ability to. You already have imbalances. You're already not sure how to properly necessarily move in the ways that you probably want to. So by not having that control, eventually that area loses stress, and then also like just going into like what we talked about last week, burnout. I mean, 2 weeks ago, like burnout. You're already doing more, so you're going to be more likely to have that feeling of burnout. You're going to have more likely to have that body breaking down, which is going to directly affect sleep, and then only add to fatigue even more.
Right. Yeah. That
Um,
sounds about right.
sounds like that was your life.
Yeah. Every
Do
day.
you? Well, do you? I guess knowing that like you do have those sleep issues, and I guess has that improved now that you're not competing?
No. No, especially recently, actually, it's been getting so much worse. But I don't know if that's like, I don't know what it's for or why, but
Got to be the dog.
yeah, I know the new puppy. No, she actually does great. She sleeps through the night, which is crazy for a puppy. But can you modify your skills to better support the challenges faced by hypermobile and EDS athletes? Can you modify your skills to better support the? Hold on, let me read that again.
I
Can
think
you
that one.
modify your skills to better support the challenges faced by hypermobile and EDS athletes? Yeah, you can modify skills, absolutely. Um, but it's more about the controlling of numbers, I think. And also just, I mean, you have to switch skills. Like if skill's really killing you, like I couldn't do a side area for a long time, so I had to switch that skill. So if a skill's killing you, you're gonna have to change it. But
I mean, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't even thought of how it's making you probably have to change your whole routine, right?
yeah, I think there was like maybe one time where I actually had to change like and get like a whole new, well, not like new skills, but like a whole new switch dance because I was doing one new skill or one different thing. But yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, and a great point too. Now I guess do you feel like like is even thinking of those skills, thinking of when you're in a routine or having to modify things, do you feel like you almost had um things basically break down because you were so tired?
Yeah, I think again, this comes back to a numbers thing, and like gymnastics is huge on numbers because it's consistency and stuff like that. It's like once you get to a certain number, your body just breaks down, you're burnt out. I mean, you're burnt out in general, like from doing the same thing every day, but you're burnt out in practice all the time. I think especially after like the first hour of doing something. Like if I had a sometimes I had days where my assignment was three in a row routines. I had to make three in a row with that were like 9 plus or something, right? Three in a row.
Sounds hard.
Sometimes, yeah, it was hard. But like sometimes I would get it done in the first three and just be awesome. And then other times it would take me literally 2 hours to do that. And then at that point, it's like if I haven't gotten it by then, my body's burnt out, my mind's burnt out. I'm getting worse as I go because I'm so tired. And it's like my body can't handle that. So I think it comes back to like the numbers thing, especially with gymnastics. And I'm sure that's with other sports too, but definitely gymnastics is a very big numbers game.
Well, and I guess you guys are critiqued literally to a T too. So I'm sure that mental side of it and that whole physical side just ties together for especially
Yeah,
for a hypermobile athlete where you're
yeah,
thinking perfection, perfection, perfection.
yeah. Do you think that's something you can train for, like controlling your movement under fatigue, or do you think no?
Yeah, no, 100%. I know you probably are seeing this even more and probably lived it, but like in PT, like a lot of times the PTs are learning how to prime the system, but strength coaches are beginning to add so many different movement based, especially at those higher levels. I don't see it at the lower levels often, but like the college, the professional, or the really high level kids, they're almost teaching their bodies how to I call them priming the body or like patterning, kind of like what probably honestly similar to what you do with spinal cord injury patients in some
Yeah, we
ways.
do a lot of patterning. Yeah, you said patterning, and I was like, oh, I know that word. We do a lot of patterning with our spinal cord patients. So yeah,
Well, then if you learn how to control it and then you just make it so hard. I mean, a lot of times in PT you don't get to that level all the time. In my world I do, but I don't think traditional senses you do. But you a lot of times the strength coach then goes ahead and might take, and that's why it's so important for like a PT and a strength coach to work so hand in hand. So they start off learning how to pattern or prime the system, and then the next thing you know, one of those two has to force them under fatigue, and then getting coaches to even push that even more. And I think it just sets them up. I mean, I definitely see it with my high level athletes, my highest level ones, that they definitely have less risk of those injuries or they're more likely to have success in their skills. And they always come back and say, I just feel like I'm moving better. And
yeah,
that alone, if you train it, eventually it minimizes those feelings of failure and hopefully those injuries,
yeah,
in my
absolutely.
opinion.
Yeah.
Um, I guess from a reframing that goal for PT and injury prevention, I mean, it is so important to learn how to control it on that sense. So I think that alone is a big part of it.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, like, it's obviously not obvious for a lot of people, and for those who don't have somebody like you who is specialized in how to treat hypermobile athletes, how would you treat it? Because I don't think it's very obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I use a technique, and I'll save some of the verbatim, but I use a technique that is basically a movement-based technique. I scan someone's system and I treat them from a full body approach. And I was lucky to, have one athlete who happened to be hypermobile, have a wife who's hypermobile, and that kind of just made me learn, kind of almost nerd out on it, and eventually go down a rabbit hole of learning how to do it. But it's almost first getting someone out of pain, then breaking down what their actual movement pattern is the first time, and getting to the root cause. A lot of people don't like hearing that, but if you teach them how to actually properly move, then stabilize and strengthen them around it, then it just makes it so much better. And then you suddenly begin to do more of like a control-based training where you're controlling the movement pattern. The only thing that sometimes gets to be a challenge is just like it's nice in my controlled environment, but it's trying to get a strength coach or going to their facility and working with them in their facility to make it so that it actually translates to actual sport, which is
Yeah,
what we
absolutely. Absolutely. That's awesome.
kind of the key in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of it's also training into end range strength, which is critical. Like, and the easiest one to think about is let's say like you're talking about when you're on the beam and you're reaching end range, trying to find a way to safely control that and strengthen that, which gets scary
Yeah.
for us as PTs if we don't do it. But for me, it's kind of just what we do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or the baseball player who you have them at the end range and you're training them at that end range to try to make it so they actually can really control that movement and lower the risk for injury.
Yeah. I did actually a lot of end range training when I was an athlete, especially in high school, because my mom was great and took me to so many different PTs and so many different strength coaches and all these things. And
The real
so I,
MVP.
yes, seriously. So I got like, I mean, if I didn't do all that stuff, I wouldn't have made it very far at all. Um, but yeah, but it was always hard to do that without irritating my symptoms. So what do you think is the best way to approach that?
Yeah, I mean, with irritating symptoms, I mean, athletes are, as you were talking about feeling off, right? I mean, athletes who they're more likely to be highly irritable. So the more you can actually teach them to, control that tissue is going to help. So one way I think of it is you get them in a position, you might have to create like a noxious stimuli or release a muscle to allow them to get to that end range, and then you basically try to retrain the movement pattern. Basically, I think it was priming the system and then strengthen it after. And the more and more they do that, the less and less irritable they are. And also, the less we have these muscle imbalances that are causing issues, the less likely they are going to be have irritable tissue. I guess for you, did you have deal with that a lot in when you were competing?
Yeah, definitely. I always like was always I was scared whenever somebody would like try to stretch me or like do like the labrum test, you know what I'm talking about, where they like take you into that full external rotation at 90 degrees. And I was like, oh my God, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Like it was always very scary because I knew that it would probably hurt and then it would cause problems for a few weeks and then blah blah. But like everybody wanted to do it, like athletic trainers, PTs, everybody wants to do it because they want to test like your range of motion and like where your end range is. So it's needed, but it's always very scary because it's like, like this is gonna make me in pain for a few days.
I mean, I'll never forget when I met you, and we were looking at something. I just remember you gave him this look like, no, no, don't do that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I imagine that probably is some of it because you're so used to people just not understanding how to even move it into that range.
yeah, absolutely, and it's hard to control.
Yeah, and I think so much of it is motor control that you have to have. I mean, motor control is the most important part for priming the system and
Yeah,
teaching someone how to actually properly move, in my opinion.
absolutely. What do you think like that looks like in training? Because it can mean a lot of different things, right?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the sport. I think sport-specific training is really important. But my belief is you teach them how to move before you get to the sport. Because most high-level athletes, they have a strength coach, they have a potentially a chiropractor or a masseuse. So the PT or an athletic trainer, they all have that. So like the PT really should be having a prime system, and then the strength coach and the PT need to work in conjunction to have a way where they can take that and they try to prime it by teaching them proper movement patterns. And then the more and more they train that and strengthen around it, and then after that, turn it to as sport specific as they can. Like for baseball, it's easy. You eventually get them into throwing, or you get them into doing med ball tosses that are rotational. I think for gymnasts, it's a lot harder for most people because most people don't understand the sport. But I think the more you teach them how to get the body, the brain to tell the muscles how to work and increase the intensity of sport specific way, the better it gets.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, and then also I think it's just about testing. You really do need to use the proper data to test. But
Yeah.
I guess one thing is what about load management for these athletes? I mean, you obviously, I know you touched on that a couple of times throughout when we talked. I think you talked about it a lot last time. I think it's huge. I guess what are your thoughts on that for hypermobile athletes?
Yeah, I think it's hard because like I would always like if we're talking about this in like an aspect of squatting, like I would always go way past what I needed to go because I could and I thought like, okay, sure, like let me just do that. But that wasn't always good for me and I think I had to learn that. So I think we tend to overdo it. Um, definitely. And I think like I'm sure you see that people tend to overdo the positions all the time, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's probably the number one thing you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we can do it. So it's like if you don't have the right training and the right knowledge about stuff, which you usually don't at a young age, you just, okay, I can do a like, you know, butt to floor squat. Let me do that when you really don't need to be doing that. Or like these big, like in gymnastics, like these big splits. I was doing over splits and like touching the ground with my foot on like, I don't know, a 3 foot table or something and still touching the ground in a split. So which is not good either. So overdoing it definitely is a big part of it, and part of why I got injured quickly. I think.
Yeah, and I think load management, it's a hot topic these days, but I think these hypermobile athletes need it more than anybody because like I don't know, the amount of times I have like I think it was my baseball guys because they're professional season, they're seeing the off season. There are certain days where someone just come in and they're like, Matt, I just need a break. And I have no problem with not pushing them that day and making it more of a recovery day. And I think it's really important for those athletes to have those recovery days to help with that load management.
Absolutely, I think so. That was huge. Like, I know I went to PT and I did a lot of like recovery stuff and even preventative stuff, which was huge. Definitely.
Do you think that's what athletes get wrong, like most when it comes to these types of things?
I think that athletes use physical therapy as a remedy after they're injured, and I think it's really incredibly helpful, especially as hypermobile, to use it as preventative. And the only reason I say that is because that's what I did, because my mom put me into it, and I've literally been in PT since I was like 9 years old, I think. Um, and it was so helpful because it like I'm sure it prevented so many more injuries, and I think that like that could be that's a huge mistake as that people do and then I mean there's tons of common mistakes like I'm sure you see a ton of different mistakes that hypermobile athletes make, so what are like your biggest mistakes you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you hit it on the head. Like reactive based care is just a bad idea. I mean, yeah, sure, it is what it is, but like everyone should be doing proactive based. I mean, that's literally what the professionals do. It's just unfortunately they're normally doing it at the end of the career,
Yeah.
which is proactive but still kind of reactive. So I think that's the number one thing. And then also not finishing through. Like a lot of them just go till their symptoms are better. A lot of them go what they think is better because they were told by someone that this is what I need to do, and they just need to almost try to utilize that prehab approach to try to strengthen. Because I mean, I see it with my athletes all the time. I have so many athletes who just don't really get injured because they're almost always doing preventative care. I mean, sure, they'll have some, but they're strengthening ahead of time, so they're lowering the risk to how they actually can use their body, and their bodies don't break down as quickly because we're either catching the problem or we're strengthening them so they're strong enough and they're lowering the risk.
Yeah, somebody said, can you expand on using PT as a preventative? I think from my point of view, I just always use it to keep my muscles strong to reduce injury. But for you, like as a PT, what would you like recommend?
Yeah, I think the best, just because there's so much data on them, is the best example is baseball because Tommy John's crazy, or the other best example is how like female soccer players use it because of ACL tears. It's basically you get them in a system, you have them do a baseline testing, then after the baseline testing, you strengthen them based on those impairments. There are certain things we know most people need to do, and there's a lot of science to back up what we need to, but I think there needs to be more in gymnastics personally. But if we strengthen them for that 6 to 8 week time frame or whatever it is that they need specifically, we see one, they perform better in their sport. Two, they have less injuries. Three, they're more confident.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and that's kind of what it looks like to me, in my opinion.
But I think the same thing is just you do too much. Um, sorry, I'm reading the comments. You do too much. If you're too flexible, you can get into too deep of positions, which ends up um, hurting you in the long run because it's putting your hips and your ankles and your knees and your shoulders and anything into these wrong positions, which is creating little mini injuries that eventually turn into bigger injuries. So I think learning how to control as a hypermobile athlete is a huge thing and something I see a lot that in gymnastics specifically that girls don't know how to do, and then they end up, in a few weeks with like a shoulder problem or a shoulder tear, and they're like, oh no, why did that happen? And I'm like, oh, you shouldn't have had your shoulder in that position. So yeah,
If only it were that easy, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's so important. I mean, just injury prevention. If I were to draw one thing in for all hypermobile athletes is injury prevention is key. It's really the thing that is gonna set up and being not that reactive based care.
Absolutely. Yeah. Preventative care to my SMA lax girls listening. Preventative PT.
Let's go.
uh, all right. Well, I think that's it. We're wrapping it up for this week, and then we will see you guys again in 2 weeks, hopefully with another special guest, maybe a former teammate of mine, maybe not. I don't know. It'll be a surprise. But yeah, thanks, Matt.
Thank you.